Let's talk about exams, medical board exams.
Welcome, Dr. Vincent. Can you give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Well, good evening. I'm Dr. Vincent Ngassa. I'm an O&G obstetrics and gynecology resident in Ukraine, and I'm in my second year of residency. So I've been in Ukraine, studying in Ukraine for about 8 years, 7 or 8 years currently. And so I've lived through the previous crisis in Lugansk and all of that. And yeah.
Okay, so can you give us a picture about what is happening in Ukraine currently?
Okay, well, in addition to what most people may already know, that there were forces, Russian forces stationed at the border, that there's been a build-up for the past 2-3 weeks, let's say for the past month or so. There's been a build-up of military activity near the Ukrainian-Russian border. And this night, let's say, or last night, depending on who is talking, earlier this morning at about 5 a.m. or so, after the Russian president gave his address concerning the issue that is concerning the issue that's going on, the buildup of tension, and after recognizing the independence of these breakaway states in Ukraine, that's the Donbas region, he formally recognized them. The military action was taken, and we had some bombings. There were missiles sent to a couple of cities in Ukraine. There was a missile sent to Odessa, one sent to, that's in East Ukraine, Odessa, Kharkov, in the eastern cities, and Chernihiv, I believe. Then missiles were sent. They're like those places were bombed. There were bombs that exploded in those regions, and also including Ivano-Frankivsk, that's in the west of Ukraine, and Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine. Okay. Explosions occurred there. And of course, the Russian military, that's the foot soldiers, have already marched into the Donbas territory. That's the separatist held territory, which had been in a battle with the Ukrainian army since 2013 during the previous conflict. So currently, that's the situation right now. There's a lot of panic everywhere, and there are some people already getting into bunkers in some cities. That's the eastern cities closer to the border. A lot of evacuation going on from the capital, Kyiv. A lot of people are moving towards the west. So, and the situation is quite uncertain, really. There's just a sense of concern and serious panic and fear.
So there is no generalized lockdown?
Well, the government had declared martial law. The borders have been closed. Ukrainian airspace had been closed already. I think a lot of observers, like there are flight observers, international flight observers, had already declared these places a no-fly zone. I think that's about a week or two ago. So officially today, the borders were closed, no flights in or out of Ukraine, and that's what's happening right now. And then we've been hearing sirens everywhere. I guess in all major cities in Ukraine, sirens were actually sounded, and I think it's an indication for people to prepare. And in some major cities too, Lviv, Kyiv, Kharkov, some mayors had told their residents or their citizens to actually get their passports in their hands, or maybe their documents, just have them in hand. So you see a lot of people just photocopying their passports, a lot of people withdrawing money. The National Bank of Ukraine has currently made a declaration that people can actually go to the banks and withdraw from the ATMs up to an amount up to 100,000 hryvnia daily. That's the maximum amount allowed. 100,000 hryvnia is about, I'm not really sure, about 30,000 is about $1,000. So 100,000 should be about $3,000 or $4,000 daily. That's the maximum allowed per person, based on the news from the National Bank of Ukraine. That's the central bank. And the president, of course, is trying to keep people calm, and is also the military has also been sent to the border to actually defend the territory. But really, there's just a sense of general panic, fear. A couple of people have died already, dozens of people have died already in some regions, and we are still getting news from other regions. Some people are saying that there's already infighting in places like Cherkasy Oblast. There's already some fighting on ground where a military base was also bombed. So,
Are schools closed down?
well, thankfully, I don't know if I could say thankfully, schools had been on long distance learning for about a week or so. But this lockdown was not due to the military buildup, but it was part of the COVID lockdown. So a reinstatement of the COVID lockdown, which was done last month, or later last month, and they had been on long distance learning for some time. So I don't know if to say that's fortunate. It's possibly fortunate anyways, but that's the situation of the schools.
Have you seen or heard that other countries have come in to evacuate their citizens?
Yes, 3 weeks ago, the Moroccan government, I think, had started sending flights to evacuate some of their citizens for those who, of course, want to return home. The Ghanaian and the Nigerian governments seem to be making plans, with the Nigerian government announcing they are going to send a plane to evacuate on Monday. And for the European nations, they had begun evacuation earlier, much more earlier, like 3 weeks ago. They had started closing their embassies, the US, the UK, and already started encouraging their citizens to leave these countries. So they had done that. They had informed their citizens, officially informed them, I think at least 3 weeks to a month ago, but there was no major evacuation from these Western nations. So the current evacuation we have, the only one we know of which has been done was Morocco. India is also considering that. I don't know how far they've gone with that. Ghana, Nigeria for the African nations. So far, that's what we have.
Okay, so the last time Russia invaded Ukraine like this was around 2013, 2014. And you were in Ukraine at that time. Comparing that time to now, what is the difference? Do you think this is a more severe case than the previous one?
It's quite different, I must say. That's the truth. Now, the difference was in the situations. Now, it seems in 2013, it seems there were a lot of people, because prior to the invasion, you actually had separatists within the country. You understand why? Ukrainians who were pro-Russian or are pro-Russian because they are still there, who were actually aiding this stuff. So, and then the Russian government came in, like, backed them. So it was a little different. But with the current situation, it's more like after that event, a lot of the Ukrainian nation is much more, should I say, pro-Ukrainian and pro-Western, something like that. So the Ukrainians really, they got some sense of a greater sense of patriotism and things like that. So right now it's different because the Ukraine, it's actually, there are not so many people, at least aside from the eastern areas, who are really pro-Russian, very few. Ukrainians are really for their territory and all for joining the EU and NATO and things like that. And now also, in as much as there was a military buildup, there's some sense of unexpectancy. Yes, we know that the US government already had informed the world that Russia was already making plans of invading. And even if they didn't invade, it wasn't necessarily because they didn't have plans to. So the US had warned, but now, I don't know, I believe people did not really believe that it would be of this nature. At least people believed, a lot of people thought that even if there was to be an invasion, it's going to be like a march through coming in from the Donbas region, because at least based on the Russian president's speech, he was going to get into the Donbas region. So people still saw it as, okay, some sort of continuation of that previous crisis and taking that same form. But in these forms where you had military planes flying over the country and dropping bombs, I think nobody envisaged that. It's almost like a full-scale invasion of the territory. In 2013, it was more like a breach of territory, advancing into someone's territory. But in this case, the whole country, more or less, has been touched at once. The whole country has been touched at the same time. So there's a real sense of panic.
Are you planning to leave the country anytime soon?
Well, the borders are, as we said, the borders are closed already. But with regards to plans of movement, of course, plans are already in place to see how best we can move, maybe moving to the west of Ukraine. But as at leaving the country, flights are not really allowed in or out of Ukraine. If the government is evacuating, it's a different situation because, and the flights are not allowed, commercial flights aren't allowed because there's the fear that flights might be put down, civilian flights might be put down. We remember what happened in 2014 when the Malaysian airplane was put down around the separatist held region. And of course, separatists were blaming the Ukrainian government was blaming Russia and things like that. So it's not really clear what to do, but at least one thing is certain that I'm planning on moving at least to the west of Ukraine. So there's nothing certain now. Movement is sure, but where to out of the country, we are not sure because flying may not be a guaranteed safety measure because you could be flying and the plane could be gone down. So we don't really know.
So has your hospital leaders or school authorities reached out to people like you who are studying there?
Well, the school has not formally reached out to apart from the time when the Moroccans wanted to travel. I think the student body came together and the school discussed with them and the other foreign students then. But aside that, the school has not necessarily made any formal statement as yet, because these things was really sudden because we woke up to the news. You understand? In those areas where these bombings happened, the people were closer. Of course, they were awakened by the bomb. So it's like you're sleeping at night and the bomb wakes you up. So really, nobody was ready for this. We knew that tensions were rising, but people were like expecting some sort of diplomatic solution. So it has been really sudden, really sudden, really unexpected. So it's like people's minds are still trying to grapple with the situation and try to come to the reality of it.
So do you think the Ukrainian government is ready to handle this situation?
Well,
measures put in place?
That's really a difficult question because, as I said earlier, nobody really wanted this to escalate to this measure. Nobody would have loved that violence should be the response. But of course, the troops have been deployed even at Kharkiv to respond. The Ukrainian government is taking all the necessary measures in place in order to protect the lives of its citizens. And I think it's showing its commitment in how best it can to address the situation, to respond as fast as it possibly can to the situation.
Yeah, so we've heard in news that the Ukrainian government said anyone who wants to fight for the country can come for guns and fight. Have you heard something like that? And will you go if you qualify for that?
Well, I've heard that, but it's yet to be verified. Of course, the reserve troops between 18 and 60 years of age were called. You understand? But saying anyone, I think I had seen that, but I'm yet to confirm it because in order to, there's a lot of rumors flying. It's really hard now to separate the news from propaganda and from rumors from both sides. But even if I qualified, or if that was the case, of course, I'll qualify based on age, but I don't think that's something I'll be ready to do, honestly. I don't think that's something I'll be ready to do.
Okay, I believe you've been in Ukraine for long, so you have a number of Ukrainian friends. Speaking with some of them, what is in the minds of Ukrainians concerning this issue?
Well,
citizens.
Yeah, thus far, the Ukrainians are, it's an admixture of feelings. There's anger, there's hurt, there's confusion, and there's panic. Because these two nations are, so to speak, they have common ancestry. And of course, the Ukrainians are generally for their country. There are a lot of people, especially we've had protests in Odessa where we had not protests, like marches. Yeah, there were marches. I think some days back, there were marches. There was a march in Odessa, there was a march in Kyiv, and march all over Ukraine. Ukrainians showing support for their country, like showing that they would defend. They are ready. to defend their country. They are committed to defend their country. Unlike in 2013, when it was like they really didn't know what to do, because there's a lot of Ukrainians also have some sort of this, a mixture of Russians and Ukrainians. They have a lot of Russian speakers here in Ukraine too, so things like that. So it wasn't really clear then. Back in 2013, there were a lot of people, Ukrainians, at least that was the general feeling, a lot of Ukrainians who were really still pro-Russian. But comparing then to now, Ukrainians are really more for their country and for the EU. And they've marched, a few days back, there were marches in Odessa and Kyiv for people showing support and their willingness, commitment, and readiness to defend their nation if need be. So yeah, there's that general feeling of, that one thing with war is that war strengthens nationalistic feelings too. And the Ukrainians currently have a really heightened nationalistic feeling for their nation. Okay. Of course, they didn't want this. But I think it's more like, if it has to come to that, then we are ready to do what we can do.
Okay, so in your opinion, what do you think is the cause of this unending war between Russia and Ukraine? What is really happening?
To get to the causes of this, one will have to get back deep into Ukrainian and Russian history. And but then the current issues, at least superficially, one of the major issues is Russia's, I don't need to say Russia or Putin's desire, but Putin doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO. Okay. He doesn't want the expansion of NATO. Of course, NATO is seen as, let's say, some sort of opponent to Russia. So it's almost like it's an organization of, if simply put, it's almost like, it seems, let's put it this way so that we should know what we're talking about. It's like NATO is an amalgamation of countries against Russia. Of course, NATO was that North Atlantic alliance was formed during the time of the Cold War, and it was formed as an opponent to the then Soviet Union.
Okay,
you understand. So things like this. Now, the Soviet Union was headed primarily by Russia. The Soviet Union broke, of course, but NATO still exists. So Russia sees the expansion of NATO into Ukraine as a threat to its national security. And of course, Putin had warned severally that Ukraine shouldn't be admitted to NATO, and maybe some other post-Soviet nations shouldn't be admitted to NATO. If not, they'll have some consequences. So I think that one thing could be the failure of Ukraine to stop trying to get into NATO, and then NATO also not trying to stop Ukraine is one of the major causes anyway, one of the causes, at least superficially. There's probably other things, really. There's probably other things beneath, but at least Russia still feels it's protecting its national security. The second thing is, based on what the Russian president said in his speech, he said that he's coming in because the government in Kyiv currently is really not pro-Russian, it's really anti-Russian. So he's coming in to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. And he feels like maybe the Ukrainian people are being improperly, they are not being led by the right leaders, so to speak, something like that. So they are being deceived or something. So he has to correct that. And he feels like he's coming to save the people from the Donbas region, who are mostly Russian speakers. At least that is the reason, that is the pretext he has given. But apart from the clear reason of NATO expansion, that which is a superficial reason, there are probably other things that we don't know of, and we'll get to know as the days go by.
Yeah. So if you are the Ukrainian president now, how will you handle this situation?
That's a difficult one to say. Really difficult, because Ukraine and Russia have really extremely close historical ties. They are roots from a single nation. Initially, there was a nation called Kievan Rus, which is the mother of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. So they are literally of common ancestry. So there's going to be a lot of cultural ties, and a good amount of the Ukrainian population also speaks Russian. You understand? More than 30% of the people in Ukraine speak Russian. So things like this really make the situation very dicey. It's just like maybe I think people in Austria, a lot of Austrians who speak German, something like that. So it's a dicey situation. They're always going to have that kind of cultural admixture. But if I were the president, I honestly do not know what I'm going to do if I would decide to step off from NATO and accept the loss of these other two territories as a sacrifice, or really, I don't know. The situation he's in is quite a difficult situation. It's a really difficult situation. But whatever he is doing, I think his main goal is to consider the safety of his people first.
Okay.
So whatever decision he's making or the Ukrainian government is making, I think that's what they have in mind.
Okay. So now most parents who have their children in Ukraine are very worried. Some have a picture in their minds that every home or every house is under fire now. But you are here having a Zoom call with me. That means though Ukraine is under attack, not everyone is really, really affected now. So what will you tell parents who have their children in Ukraine now?
Okay, what I'll tell parents my recommendation to parents would be that they should keep in touch. First of all, they shouldn't, at least for the moment, they shouldn't over panic. They should be worried and they should be cautious, but they shouldn't over panic, because over panicking even prevents one from making rational decisions. And they should pray, seriously pray. Well, there are some people who may not be religious, but at least for those who are religious, they should pray hard, pray seriously, because the situation is currently really unpredictable. We really don't know what to expect next. It was really unexpected. And there have been places where people have been asked to get into bomb shelters, for example, in Kharkov, which is just an hour away from the Ukrainian, which basically shares borders with Russia. People have gone into bomb shelters in Kharkov, in Sumy. There's a lot of evacuations going on in Kyiv. And thankfully, of course, when I say people have gone into bomb shelters, it's not like foreigners were set aside. No, like people just go into the bomb shelters. So they should try to keep in touch with their kids as much as they can. And if there are some people who cannot really get to the kids immediately, they shouldn't worry too much, because being in a bomb shelter, people are underground. So there could be disturbances with internet connectivity and phones and at the moment. So for now, there is panic, but there isn't, fire is not burning everywhere, as you rightly put it. Fire is not necessarily burning everywhere. Dozens of people have died in these places that were attacked, but there isn't yet an all-out war or a full-scale war. War has been declared, war has begun, but there isn't a full-scale war yet. So at the moment, people are still staying put, staying calm, stocking up in case of anything. So there's still a possibility of just being calm and staying put at home for now. So for now, things are a little calm, not very calm, but a little calm.
All right. So
while we're waiting for whatever is going to happen.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Dr. Vincent, and we are with you in prayers. And just as you mentioned, don't over panic, and just make sure that you don't be at the wrong place at the right time. We will keep in touch and make sure you guys are all safe. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
Thank you.